The following featured presentation is part of the Skywalking Network.
This is what you can look forward to on episode 469 of Skywalking Through Neverland.
That you'd build something and then we would shoot it and then you'd see it in the shot and it was like some magical process happened. And that's not the one that you built anymore. It's become something else. So I was there opening day when it came out in 77 and I saw it 31 times in the theater. Why do the bad guy ships always look so cool? I said, because real spaceships look like hot water heaters wrapped in gold foil with plumbing on them. The morning we were going to finally see the film, and I remember thinking, I have no point of view anymore. I've been looking at this for so long.
How's that look?
Are you ready?
Off to Neverland.
Here we go!
A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away.
To all who come to this happy place, welcome. Disneyland is your land.
When I first made Star Wars, everybody in Hollywood said, well, this is a movie Disney should have made.
You're more than just fans. You're family.
Best day ever!
Secrets love.
It's about family, and that's what's so powerful about it.
Hey.
You use a bird to write with, it's called tweeting.
When we visit the world of Disney, we never grow old. It's a Peter Pan, Never Land that keeps us young in heart.
This is Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi, and you are skywalking through Neverland. I have a good feeling about this.
Hey, Skywalkers! Ever wonder who built the dozens of fantastic movie models you see in your favorite films? Chances are it was the same guy, and chances are very, very good that we have him in this episode. But for now, we want to welcome you back to
Skywalking Through Neverland.
I am Richard Woloski, but now everyone please say hello to my sweetie wife Sarah, who is rocking this Iron Man dress.
This is super cute. Iron Man, look at that.
Strike the
Love it.
pose. Strike the Iron Heart pose.
Oh, the Iron, is this it?
I don't know. Yes.
Oh, Iron Man, yes. Where'd my chair go?
Oh, it's back
My
over
chair
here.
went away.
All right, but now you gotta do the whole Black Widow
Where's
kneeling
my
thing.
Iron Man helmet? Oh.
Oh. Oh, well, you want an Iron Man helmet? If only we had one sitting on our desk.
Can I wear this?
Yeah. So you gotta do the whole show like this now.
Oh no, my hair is messed up, but how's this?
All right.
There we go. How's that look? Oh my God, this is so stupid. Why are you laughing at me?
No, we're not laughing with you, so don't worry about that.
Oh no.
Now the reason why we have this on our desk is because it was signed by Adam Carolla, one of my favorite podcasters ever. That's his signature, if you can tell. Hey, you know what? Grab the picture.
Yeah.
Here's me as Iron Man when I met Adam Carolla for the first time. Here we are in North Hollywood.
And is that the helmet?
That's the helmet right there.
Yep.
I had him autograph it like a week later at a book signing.
Yeah.
And I showed up. He's like, "You're Iron Man." And if you listen to the show that week, it was like 2014.
He mentions
He
you.
mentions me in like a 5-minute little story about how I was there as Iron Man.
Yeah, that was so cool.
And then I went to the book signing and got this signed.
Yay! We gotta dust it.
Yes, we do.
Well, Skywalkers, we are your enthusiastic podcast destination for the many decades of your Star Wars, Disney, Marvel, and pop culture fandom. So it's time for your weekly Wookiee hug and your little sprinkle of pixie dust. For our family of Skywalkers. You are why we keep this going every week. We love talking to you guys. And speaking of that, we are live on the Skywalking Through Neverland YouTube channel. Yes, we go live to record our wraparounds each week because we really just love talking with you and sharing your comments as we record the show.
We love the interactions in the Sky Chat.
Yes, we do. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel for notifications. So just head to YouTube, Search Skywalking Through Neverland, hit subscribe, and then hit the little bell that pops up after you subscribe to make sure you get notifications for when we go live.
Now, I'm not sure what happened, but last week we said that our subscribers were 8930.
Yep.
And let's go to 8935.
Yep.
Well, I'm not sure what happened, but we dipped.
Yeah, we went down 5. What the heck?
We lost 5 subscribers.
We don't know what happened.
Went from 8930 to 8925. So
sad.
So what do you say we get back to the to ground zero of 8930 by next week?
Let's do it.
What do you say?
Let's do it, Skywalkers. All right, well, in this episode, we don't speak to Adam Carolla, but we do speak with John Goodson, and he is an ILM model maker who has worked on everything from various Star Wars projects to just about everything with an Enterprise, an Ape City, a Transformer, a Wild West train, and the list goes on and on and on. John tells so many great stories about the models he made and what inspired him to become a professional model maker. And he told us so many stories that we had to split his conversation up. So next week, you'll get part 2. Now, also, as a reminder, you can meet John on August 1st during the Virtual Cantina tour when it stops in San Francisco. And we want to give a huge shout out and thank you to Spencer Jowitz for setting this up.
All right, now we are being sponsored by Small World Vacations, and they are a diamond-level Disney vacation planner travel agency and can help you book your trip to a Disney park around the world or on a Disney cruise. I'm going to put my head right on their logo. There you go. Perfect. Now, best of all, this service is free of charge. So head over there to smallworldvacations.com for a no-obligation price quote and tell them Skywalking Through Neverland sent you. I'm trying to point to the logo. There you go. There we are. Tell them that Skywalking Through Neverland sent you to Small World Vacations.
Right underneath
Where are we? There we go. There you go. Perfect. All right, now we are recording this from Long Beach, California on June the 18th, 2024.
Okay, where's June going, first of all?
Where's 2024 going?
And second of all, Richard, what happened today in Star Wars history?
Perfect segue. Well, to celebrate the 25th anniversary of The Phantom Menace, let's go back 25 years to June the 18th, 1999. And this is when the first digital screening is held for The Phantom Menace in association with Cinecom and Texas Instruments. And the screenings are held at 2 theaters in California, one of which was the AMC in Burbank, the Burbank 14, where I saw it.
Oh, sweet.
And then there were 2 in New Jersey where I didn't see it.
That's random.
Yeah, isn't it?
New Jersey?
Yeah.
And Burbank.
Yeah, Burbank.
I mean, Burbank makes sense. Makes sense.
2 in California, one in Burbank and one in Chatsworth.
Oh.
Yeah, so
okay.
I saw this, and this was, my mind was blown because I'd never seen a digital projected film before.
Oh.
And it was so crystal clear. And that's really the whole point of this, is that studios want to give the theaters a crystal clear image.
Right, because with film reels, right, they get dusty.
They get dusty. They get heaven forbid it gets scratched. It's doomed.
Oh.
And those prints are very expensive, and that's another big benefit for digital projection. Instead of striking all those prints, they can just go send a link to the theater. Now, if you read the book Skywalking: The Life and Times of George Lucas, he predicts this back in 1983.
Whoa.
He said back then this is where he wants film to go.
Wow.
It's all uploaded.
So now that's what happens, right? Everyone gets digital projection now?
Honestly, I don't know about that.
Okay.
All right. Now, want to talk more history?
Yeah.
Well, let's roll into our first part 1 of our conversation with ILM model maker John Goodson and learn about all the fantastic models he's made in all your favorite movies.
And make sure you watch the YouTube version because there's tons and tons of the video footage and pictures of these models as he's talking about them. Having that visual,
I think, will really enhance your appreciation when you see the Razor Crest. And you'll be really, really sad when you see the Razor Crest being blown up.
Spoilers.
John Goodson is a studio model maker and digital modeling artist for Industrial Light and Magic and has worked on various Star Wars projects, Star Trek, Planet of the Apes, Transformers, and maybe 100 more.
Come on by and say hello to John and get an autograph at the Virtual Cantina San Francisco stop on August 1st. But for now, hey, John!
Hey, guys.
We're so happy to have you here because you have your fingerprints on so many beloved films.
Of course, yes.
You can look at that ship and go, hey, look, there's John Goodson's fingerprints.
It's funny. I always felt like, especially in the model shop, that you'd build something and then we would shoot it and then you'd see it in the shot and it was like some magical process happened. And that's not the one that you built anymore. It's become something else. And I've always been fascinated by that because it just sort of transitions. It becomes this other ethereal thing. I really felt it on Back to the Future 2. And there's a floating sign that's out when they're on the Skyway and the DeLorean and they're riding with all the other cars at night. And there's a freeway sign that says something to London. It gives the time and whatnot. And that was one of the first things I built where I got to see it filmed and then saw it in the movie. And I was like, they can't possibly be the same thing I made, So it always feels that way.
I think that's what happened to all the visual effects and the special effects model makers for Star Wars when they first see that Star Destroyer coming overhead during Star Wars. They're like, wait a minute, we built that? Look, it looks it's so real.
That is really crazy. When you look at that model, it's only 3 feet long. It is unbelievable that is what you're seeing on screen. And that's that magical process where something happens between this 3-foot piece of plastic and this monstrous ship that goes on for 40 seconds going over your head. And it was funny, we built Moff Gideon's light cruiser for Mandalorian season 2, and that was kind of a Star Destroyer-esque ship, and it was 5 feet long.
Oh wow!
And it was interesting. Well, it's crazy because I'm working, me and a guy named Dan Petrascu, and Dan's a machinist model maker, and it's the two of us building these things. And I took it down to Celebration in Anaheim. We set up all the models. We had the Razor Crest, we had the Ahsoka ship, and nobody knew what it was. Very few people knew what it was. Then we had a metal print of the Starfighter, the N1 Starfighter, that they did for John Favreau, and he let us use it for the display. Then we had the Light Cruiser. So I had those things out there for a few days, and Light Cruiser was built during the pandemic. And I was looking at it when I was in Anaheim. I'm like, I don't know how in the world we got this thing finished. Because it is really complicated. And, and most of it's handmade. There are some 3D prints on it, but things like the bridge, all the main structure, it's all handmade, and it's so intricate, and it just kind of blows me away. And it's really interesting because we build it, and then we take it out on stage, and the first shot we did, we mimicked that shot from the first film where it goes over camera. And it's really interesting. It went over camera, and there were these panels that came over, and they were just warped and distorted. I'm like, what is that? And we get through doing the thing, and I go out and look at it. These pieces are about 1/4 of an inch square, and what's happened is the solvent that we used to glue the styrene has melted them slightly. It's something so small you almost can't see it, but on camera it looks like these giant warped pieces of metal going overhead. You're like, what in the hell is that? And so there's all this stuff you see on camera that you don't see to the eye. So it was always really interesting. Every time I put the camera on that, there'd be something else. I'm like, oh yeah, got to fix that because it looks fine to the eye, but in person it didn't look so, or on camera it didn't look so hot. But that's what's so stunning about that 3-foot model. And then they built the 8-foot Star Destroyer for Empire.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, and the level of detail there is phenomenal. But the 3-footer held up so beautifully in the first film. It's really something. Then you look at the Blockade Runner, it's about 7 feet long, 6.5, 7 feet long. So the little ship is way bigger than the big ship that's chasing it, in reality. So
that's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah,
neat stuff.
And you don't know beforehand what kind of angles the director is going to get. Does he want to get a close-up on this, a long shot? You just build it so they can do whatever they need.
Sometimes we'd have a pretty good idea. We'd get a pretty good sense of it. Sometimes they'd have storyboards. And so you would know that, we need to build up a 6-foot model because it's got to hold up that level of detail. It's got to be that big to see it all. Sometimes, you'd know it's going to be only the distance, so you could build something fairly small that was lower resolution. So, and then other times you build insert pieces that are bigger just to convey the scale correctly. So it was always kind of, and sometimes you're forced to use stuff in ways that you really wouldn't like to. You're shooting stuff it's way too small, and and it's just that's what you wind up having to do. And I remember in one particular instance, the Republic cruiser, and it comes into the Federation battleship at the beginning of Phantom Menace. and we painted that. And the producer was like, only paint it on the one side. We're never going to see the other side. We get it out on set. Guess which side we're going to see. We're going to see the side we didn't paint. And it needs to be ready to go by lunch. And it was like, okay, as usual, pull your hair out, paint the other side that you were never going to see. Yeah, that kind of stuff happens all the time.
That goes to show you, never trust a producer. Never.
Well, it's just, things change. It's a fluid environment. And, someone can come out and go, you know what? Shall we be better if we actually turned it a little bit? And so suddenly you're seeing something you never saw. So, and that's the fascinating thing about working on stage. Stage is so expensive because you've got the cost of the stage itself, but you've got a cost of the lighting package, the DP, the camera operator. All of these costs go into it. So, if you had a taximeter, this thing would be spinning really hard and they want to make a change. It's amazing how fast it can happen because you're in full adrenaline mode. You're trembling because you're operating at such a high rate of speed. But something that might take a couple of days to get done in the shop might get done in 20 minutes. And everybody's on fire doing it. It's really something. Yeah. And it's a lot of coordination, too.
Yeah, back in the day, I used to work in a creature effects shop and a modeling shop. And so many times the producer would say, no, we're just going to see this side. And everyone there knew better. It's like, no, we're going to paint the whole thing. And guess what happened when we got to set? Yeah, the director would say, you know what? Let's see this from the other side, too.
Exactly.
And the producer's like, oh, no. And then we turn it around. And the producer's like, yeah, I told him to do that. I told him to paint that. Yeah. It's like, oh, come on.
But let's dial it back to where this all started for you, John. What models did you make as a kid? Like, what were those seminal models?
So for me, it was really interesting because I was 3 years old and Lost in Space was on, and it was an episode called The Derelict, which I didn't know that at the time, but I remember it really distinctly because it scared me to death. But it was the one where there's this big alien spacecraft that Jupiter 2 comes upon and has this kind of mouth thing on one end of it that opens, and the Jupiter 2 gets taken inside of it. And now, it's funny because that alien spacecraft went up as set dressing on a couple of sets, and I don't know if you know who Gary Kerr is. But Gary knows a lot about particularly the Enterprise from the original Star Trek, but he's the guy that Polar Lights and Mobius go to for all the details about things like Land of the Giants, Lost in Space, Voyage of the Bottom of the Sea, and he gives them all the specs of everything. He's got blueprints, he's got drawings, he's got a huge archival database. And Gary sent me some pictures of that alien derelict ship used as set dressing, and it looks like it was probably about 10 feet long when it was intact. And they had a 9-inch model of the Jupiter 2 that they had going around it. But when the Jupiter 2 goes inside of it, the story was that it was the 10-foot model. And the 10-foot model is like a unicorn, kinda. People talk about it, but there wasn't a lot of proof that it existed. But I was so fascinated as a little kid, because Jupiter 2 comes in its full frame, and it lands, and you really get to see the ship. And I just thought, if I wanted to take the TV apart to get it out of there, because I'm. So I was fascinated right then and there. And then we moved out to California. I grew up in North Carolina initially. We moved out to California. My dad was in the Air Force, and we were stationed at Hamilton Air Force Base in Nevada, which is in Marin County. And our next door neighbor was a fighter pilot. And he got me watching Star Trek with him. And I just thought that was great. I loved it. And somebody gave me a copy of The Making of Star Trek. And at this point, I'm 5. And I got that this stuff wasn't real. It's models, it's props, it's sets, but I thought that was absolutely fascinating. And I think my first model, there were a couple of airplanes that I was given first, and then I think the third one was the Enterprise kit.
Oh, nice.
So, so I went up with that. And it's really interesting because I just thought that was so fascinating. And then I remember there wasn't a whole lot kind of in between there, and I remember Space 1999 came out, and that was 75, I think. And the visual effects, the special effects on that, they look so cool. I mean, it was TV, but the Eagles, and they were flying all this stuff on wires. There was a lot of in-camera stuff, and it looked so great. And I just thought that show was fascinating. And I was in a grocery store, and there was issue 7, I think, of Starlog magazine. And it had Star Wars on the cover of it. It had the X-Wing and TIE Fighter promo shot they always used. But inside, there were photographs of the models from Space 1999 with Brian Johnson and Nick Alder holding them.
Oh.
That was like a gold mine. Because, this is pre-internet. There was almost nothing in the way of making of books. So here were pictures that gave you an indication of how large these things were. And that was fascinating because the Big Eagle was 44-inch. I think the mid-size was 22. And like that, an 11-inch. And then I think they had one that was even smaller than that. And they had 2 or 3 of the big 44-inch ones. I don't know how many of all of them they had, but this was gold as far as I was concerned. And I begged my grandmother to buy me the magazine, and she did. And in there was an article about Star Wars because it hadn't come out yet. And I looked at that and I thought, this looks really interesting. So I was there opening day when it came out in 77, and I saw it 31 times in the theater during that first run. But it was in the theater for about a year. But I saw it about every other, like more. It wasn't once a week, but it wasn't too far off from that. And I was just fascinated, and I started writing letters to Lucasfilm going, hey, I want to come out there and I want to work for you guys, and I'm 14, and they're like, they'd write back and go, thanks so much for your inquiry. Your letter's on file. Please don't write us anymore. And so I wrote a few of those to them, and what are they going to do, a 14-year-old kid? But, and then flash forward years later, I'd been at the company for a few years, and there was a warehouse space that was kind of off-site called Faraway Bay. And Jeff Mann, who was the head of the model shop, he said, go over there and see if there's anything we want to keep for the model shop. And so I go over there with the key and I open the door. It's like a 2,100 square foot space. And I open the door and there's the full-size sand skiff down at the end, and a snow speeder and mine cars and speeder bikes, all these props and stuff. And then big 4-foot square boxes filled with Ewoks and Stormtrooper costumes. Just, probably 8 or 10 of those boxes. On the back side of that, on the other side of the shelving, there were a lot of wooden patterns from the model shop. And we definitely wanted those. But in the ferry...
Please tell me you kept everything.
I don't remember. We probably did. Because, that was just where they were being sent for offsite storage. But, we tried to keep all of that stuff because we would reuse it sometimes. But in the back right corner of that warehouse, the very corner, was a little box about maybe 6-7 inches square with all these letters crammed in it. And I thought, I wonder if my letters are in there. And they were. They got my letters back.
Really?
They were on file in a cardboard box in a warehouse that nobody goes to. But yes, they were on file.
That's insane.
Return to sender. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
But isn't that how John Knoll got into working with Lucasfilm? Because he wrote to the Star Wars effects team, and they said, yeah, if you're ever in town, come on by. It's like, is that John?
Yeah, he came by. It was during Battlestar Galactica. And he spent the day there because his dad had a business conference in San Francisco. Or no, in LA. And so he got to be there and see all that stuff. And so he sort of made that initial connection. And then he came back. That would have been like 78, 79. Yeah. And he came back. I'm not sure what year he started. Maybe like 86, 85, 86 maybe.
Okay.
And yeah, and it was funny because he came in when he was hired. And they hired him, I think it was an effects camera. And he came in and he started talking to the camera guys about all these technical terms about photography. And I was talking to somebody, I can't remember who it was, and they said, I knew right then he was going to be my boss. and ultimately he was.
Oh my God.
See, no, that's how you do things. You show up. You show your interest. He just knocked on the door. They said, yeah, come on in.
Wow.
Yeah, that was an amazing story. I was so jealous that he got to see all that stuff.
Oh.
So yeah.
Oh my goodness. That is walking into history right there.
Yeah.
Now, were you more of an MPC kid or an Aurora model kit kid?
Boy, that's a... There was Ertl, there was AMT, there was,
The biggies were MPC. That was like the Star Wars.
Yeah.
MPC had the Star Wars, where Aurora had like Planet of the Apes. It had the monsters. Yeah.
I had a lot of both.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting to see that, who is it? There's Atlantis models right now. They're reissuing, I think they're old Aurora kits. And I'll do a little pitch here, not that I'm getting anything for it, but Monsters in Motion is selling these Atlantis kits, and they're repops of the original Aurora molds, which is kind of neat.
No kidding.
So, yeah, they're not doing the sci-fi stuff. It seems like they're doing, ships and planes and things like that.
Oh,
but it's kind of cool that at least some of these kits are getting a fresh chance, getting a new life.
Right.
But, yeah, it was funny. I built a lot of stuff. And then probably when I was about 13, 14, I started building things out of paper because I didn't know about plastic. Plastic seemed unattainable. So poster paper, built a lot of stuff out of poster paper, mat board, cardboard.
Did you create those models like from your head, like looking at the model?
Yeah, looking at the pictures.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting thing because there used to be a 3-ring binder at the archive, and it was filled with all these pictures people took of stuff that they'd made, their X-Wings, their Star Destroyers, whatever, and they sent to the archive, and they kept this binder of them. And I loved to look through it because ultimately there was a limited amount of reference information that was available, but everybody's looking at the same stuff. And the variation in proportions and stuff, it was really fascinating to look at. It's kind of like, it's very interesting to see. They're all looking at the same basic information to begin with. and extrapolates out into something that's pretty different sometimes. Kind of like, that's very interesting.
Yeah, the interpretation's all in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that goes a step further in terms of people that do studio scale model building. And there are a fair number of them that do it. And there's some really, really good people that go in depth, research every single piece, track down the original kits or use castings of them, but, and build these incredibly detailed replicas, which is just fascinating to me to see. I mean, there is some beautiful, beautiful stuff that people are doing. There's one right now that's at the Academy Museum. There's a 5-foot Falcon down there. They have on display with the Dijkstraflex, and it's a guy named Sean Sides built that. And he's brought it down a couple of times now. But yeah, 5-foot Falcon. So there are a few people that built the 5-footer, and there are a lot of people working on them now. But yeah, it's very interesting to see that.
Wow.
To see people replicate these so beautifully.
Yeah, at one time saying something was fan made, it's like, okay, you put together a couple of pieces of cardboard and use some Gorilla Glue, you'll get something. But fan made now has a whole different meaning, whether it's models, whether it's fan films, whether it's books. Sometimes some of that stuff is even better than some of the professional stuff.
It's stunning, and you add in 3D printing. That's a whole other...
That's a game changer.
Yeah, whole other realm. So, it's really interesting. The capacity that people have to do stuff. The technology's gotten so much better and so much more affordable. You can make a studio quality product, and you're right. The models, the costumes, all of it. You look at the detail. Look at the 500 first. I mean, they go through this whole vetting process for their armor and stuff like that. It has to pass inspection before they're allowed to join.
Yeah, their number one question is, if you're a stormtrooper, can you sit? Because if you can sit, you're not a real stormtrooper.
Yeah. So, John, what makes a good cinematic model? Is it that all the parts look functional, or what is it? What is that magic touch?
Well, it's funny. I remember I did an interview for, I think it was Discovery Channel. And we talked about that. They're like, why do the bad guy ships always look so cool? And I said, because real spaceships look like hot water heaters wrapped in gold foil with plumbing on them. I mean, that's what real stuff looks like. And so much of it's about the form, and the form can convey so much. And it's interesting that really simplistic shapes like this, the Death Star or the Borg cube, those work, and it's surprising to me sometimes you look at it and go, wow, I wouldn't think that would actually be viable, but it looks great. I remember when Oblivion came out and there was the tetrahedron, and I didn't see that in the theater, and I was really sorry I didn't. But when it came out, I bought it on Apple. It came out first there, and I bought their HD version of it. And what I was curious about was to see what indicators they gave for scale. Because I was doing digital paint at that point. So I got the Apple HD version of it, and I looked at it, and I'm like, couldn't tell much about it. It was just a shape. The Blu-ray came out about 2 weeks later. I bought that. It was like night and day. With the Blu-ray, the resolution was so high, I could see little windows and details, and there's all this stuff that was on there that really helped to sell the scale of it. But, and again, that's a very simplistic form, and that one in some ways was less successful. But something like the Death Star, it's really interesting when you look at, Ralph McQuarrie did these matte paintings of the surface details for the wider shots. Oh. So you had like a 3-foot model that was the full, complete Death Star on New Hope. And then Ralph did these close-up sections, and then there were the model, the landscapes they built out of the cast parts. But, Ralph's paintings, it's a gray ball. But Ralph took that and elevated it into this amazing piece. And it's very repetitive. But the way he executed it looks so good. And it was interesting because on Rogue One, we're going back and studying all of that stuff that Ralph did. Because he really, he just put such a great look on it. And Ralph was such an incredible artist. And super humble guy. And unbelievably nice and kind. And he blew me away with his vision of stuff, and it was always interesting because he seemed like just this old guy, old white guy, and that was never what was going on in his head. What he would execute was so amazing because he did some of the concepts for the mothership. He did concepts for Star Trek: The Motion Picture. But, you look at his artwork and then you look at Joe's artwork, and that's a whole other type of thing. And it's so amazing, so having that as source material to begin with, wow, what an advantage.
Is that Joe Johnston? Is that you're referring to? Okay.
Yeah, nice. Joe Johnston. Just amazing. I love his illustrations. They're just incredible.
Yeah, they're fantastic. So. You know what? Somewhere right over here, I just had them in my hand. I was pen pals with Ralph McQuarrie for a little bit, and we were going back and forth, and I'm writing this guy who designed Star Wars as a 12-year-old, and my mind is being blown. Because I'm asking him questions I'm not seeing in any other any other print, any other interviews,
or magazines.
And now here I am asking the man. It's like this is the first step to skywalking through Neverland was in 1984. Well, I gotta. What are those? Give me 1 second.
Yeah.
Moment.
Yeah, he was such a great guy.
Oh, there
he would come. Well, he would come a lot when we were doing the prequels.
Mm-hmm.
He would come to visit us because he was really good friends with Doug Chang. But he would come pretty regularly, just to kind of be in the art department and kind of look at what we were doing and stuff. But he was such an awesome person.
Wow.
Check it out. Fan letters
Oh
from
wow,
Mr. Ralph McQuarrie. Look at
that's
that
really
pen.
cool.
Look at that penmanship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful penmanship.
He was something else. He built models too, and they're beautiful.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of my prized possessions is an autographed Ralph McQuarrie production painting from Return of the Jedi. We had that hanging up right in the hallway, so we can look at it every single day.
That's cool. Gosh, the other day I saw some of the original paintings he did. They were the originals.
Wow.
And it was so weird to be like, this is the real thing. This is the paint on map board. This is it. Really, God, it's amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, his vision of it was so strong. And I remember one of the stories he told. We were talking because he would come up and he'd stay for lunch, and there were like 10 of us in the art department. We'd all sit around and just ask him stuff. And he was talking about he was in art school. And he said he's walking home one night, and he was walking by this empty lot. And there was a chain link fence. There was an overpass. There was a brick building. And there was a billboard up there with fluorescent lights on it, sort of lighting this whole thing. And he said, I'll never do anything as incredible as this. Just that vignette, what he's looking at. And I'm like, wow, he did so much stuff, and it was so incredible. And he was so visionary. And that's the thing I'm saying. That's what I'm saying when I'm saying he's just this old guy. You wouldn't expect these things to come from him. And they were just so incredible. And there was so much involved. The level of art direction in everything he did was so high, and he had these visions of things that he could execute. Just phenomenal.
I guess the age really worked for him because over all the years, the visual information he has taken in. So now when he needs to do something, all that will come to the forefront.
Yeah, but some of that's just innate. That was just who he was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I think
he just had that ability.
He had that Rolodex of visual information he could just pull whenever he wanted.
And make stuff up when he needed to.
Yeah, and have you seen The Acolyte yet?
No, I haven't.
One of the first shots is the character May walking underneath a little structure that was based on a Ralph McQuarrie painting that they used in The Force Awakens, and now they're using it in The Acolyte. It's like, okay, they know their Star Wars if they're going to pull from Ralph McQuarrie.
Yeah.
All right, now I want to ask you here, what are the steps for a physical model maker working in TV and film? Do you see concept art of the things you have to build, or do you have to make most of the parts? Do most of the parts come from kit bashing? What's the process?
Yeah, it varies. It varies a lot depending on what it is. But we did use a lot of kit parts. That's great detail right off the bat. One of the most important things for Star Wars, Battlestar Galactica, not so much for Star Trek, because Star Trek was more about just the forms themselves, and there were cleaner ships. But all that stuff, the Star Wars and Galactica, that sort of thing, that mechanical language that's implied is really important. And those model parts give you, right off the bat, they give you the pieces to start putting this together with. But the thing that's kind of interesting is it's not that you can just go grab out a bunch of random pieces and stick stuff on there. And Star Crash is an example where it looked like they built some stuff and they put glue on it and rolled it in parts and went, done, It just, it isn't thought out. It doesn't really work like that. You look at the Millennium Falcon, all the plumbing and machinery and stuff, it looks functional. And that's because you had industrial designers putting this stuff on, and they're selectively picking those parts and picking relationships that sort of imply functionality. And I remember, I told this story before, and it got printed like it was me doing it, and it wasn't. And what it was, on Rogue One, Coley Wirtz was working on the design for those. They looked like a big sea turtle almost, and what they were carrying were the cargo containers, those orange containers.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was working on it, and he was working on the top of it, and we were talking about it. And he was talking about, what do I put on here for detail? I said, well, it's got this big flat deck on top. It's a cargo vessel. My take on it would be that there'd be some kind of railing system up there that you could put these containers on, and you could put a bunch of those on top of it. So I said, why don't you do something that looks like a rail system, and it doesn't have to be explained how it works or anything like that. But if it works for you in your head, that'll telegraph. the basic idea will come through and it will make sense because it's a logical progression of where this thing is. And that's making that mechanical language stuff work, so that it's actually believable. And that was the thing that Star Wars had that was so strong, was the guys that were doing this really thought out the look. They had a language that they understood, and they applied it, and it worked really, really well. And it was, based foundationally in having the kit parts, but also there's that whole plating style that Star Wars has with the little notched edges and things. And that was because they had these little notchers. They were for circuit boards. You could cut little notches out of the end. That's what that was. They were using those to notch the panels. But it gave it a signature look. Yeah, it gave a signature look to it.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Wow.
And for anyone who doesn't know, kit bashing is when model shops will go and buy tons of existing merchandise models, consumer models, and then the model makers will come and say, hey, I need one of these, and just bash different kits to make their own kit. So now for you as the physical model maker, are you looking at concept art for these ships?
I'm good at building them, and the design part of it, there have been elements where I've been able to do some design work, but predominantly the way it works is there'll be an evolution to it. Like on the prequels, we had a very luxurious setup because we had George once a week at least would come in, and he would talk about what he wanted, and Doug would work on sketches. We had a number of different artists in there, and it transitioned. This was from the time initially, like on Phantom Menace, it was like Doug was doing acrylic paintings, it was marker sketches, and we're doing foam core mock-ups, and then more detailed physical models of things. And so Doug would come up with an idea, somebody would draw a version of it, George would approve that, and then give it to myself or John Duncan on the first movie, and then we would usually build a little tiny version of it. Sometimes I remember the Republic Cruiser, the first model of that was about a little over an inch, like an inch long, because I'd already built the Federation battleship, which was 16 inches in diameter. So I made this little tiny Republic Cruiser that was going to be taken into it. And I showed it to George and I said, the basic proportions close? He was like, yeah, okay. So from that, I built one that was about 2 feet long, and then George would see it each week and he would make it, he would talk about change this, change that. I remember the Gungan submarine at one point, it had 2 canopy bubbles on top. And went pretty far down the path with that. And then at a certain point, George went, no, make it 3. So got rid of the two bubble window, built a whole new one that was a 3 bubble window, But so that, that kind of thing could happen. But he would see it each week and make changes, ask for this, make that shorter. So go through a refinement process. And when we were done with it, it was a 3-dimensional blueprint that you could hand over to the stage department or the model shop or the computer graphics folks. Whoever needed it would then have a 3-dimensional, this is it. This is the Bible. So, yeah.
Wow.
But, yeah. So, and then as things progressed, there was more digital work and less marker sketches and paintings, but the volume of work went up dramatically. So, suddenly you could basically, on episodes 2 and 3, you could almost put together an art of book from each Friday art department meeting. There was so much stuff generated. It was really amazing.
Is that because it was easier to make a digital model than it was the physical models? They said, okay, just throw in 1,000 ships.
Well, they could do a lot of painting. These are mostly paintings. So it's concept art, and we work from the concept art. They give it to us and we build the model. But for the concept artists, the volume of work just escalated dramatically.
Oh, I see.
Did the concept artist ever come to the model makers and say, yeah, we're having trouble really visualizing this. What do you see? Or is it like Doug Chang's like, no, I'll call you when I need you?
No, I remember a couple times that I got drawings and I'm like, you can't make this because it's an Escherism where something's been drawn that can't physically exist. And a couple times I put together some pieces and went, see how this doesn't, you can't do this? Yeah, I get it. Okay. So I go back and they redraw it, but it was like, but that was rare. Most of these guys have got a really good handle on 3-dimensional stuff. They're pretty much in the ballpark almost all the time. But I can remember a couple of instances in particular where it's like, yeah, I can't build that. You can draw it, but I can't build it. So
they can type this, George, but we can't say it.
Yeah.
Well, so when you kit bash something, like you're using a kit, what is like your favorite Greebly to use? Like what is your favorite item that really, helps you in a kit, in a model?
That's hard to say. There are some kits that were really heavily used for Star Wars and Galactica, and they were like these Hasegawa German railgun kits. Those are a great parts donor. German tanks Bandai 140 SL, was it? It's a Panzer G or something like that. one of those. There are a bunch of those used on the Sandcrawler. But, you know, there are particular kits that were really, really, they were used a lot, and the parts were really, really good for that. And, you know, a lot of times we used to have a whole bunch of shelves in the model shop. One whole wall was nothing but kits. And you go pull the boxes out, and what was in the box may not actually be what started off in the box. It might be something else, and a lot of the parts are gone. So you're pulling off whatever, and you get people that call it, what is the piece that's inside the shuttle bay of the Excelsior in Star Trek VI? I'm like, I don't know. It was something that looked good that was, you know, I was laying around. I have no idea what it was. But people will put the time and effort into it and figure it out, which just is amazing to me.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. Oh, no kidding.
Okay. But I guess it depends on what you're working on. Like you said, the Star Trek is more interested in the forms and not so much the detail in those forms. Which...
Yeah, you don't have, in Star Trek, you don't see, I mean, there's some of it on the Bird of Prey. There's some of that exposed plumbing and that sort of thing, but it's fairly small. But Star Trek, you know, the Starfleet look, everything's very clean.
Yeah.
You don't have those detail trenches and things like that. They rely more on the paint and the basic forms. So they've got a lot of paneling, and the shapes, you know, are what drives the Star Trek look more. Huh. And Star Wars can be all over the place, you know, but there tends to be a lot more hardware. And one of the things I notice on the newer stuff we're doing for the TV shows, the Ahsoka ship, the light cruiser, is that there's a lot more detail on them than what would have been on an older Star Wars design, like from the first trilogy. And I think that's partly because it's being designed on the computer. And during Rogue One, they built up a database of kit parts that were common, that were used on the trilogy, the first trilogy, and they had them built as digital models. And so they have those available. And so a lot of that gets put onto them these days. But what they're doing a lot too is they're taking those, they're scaling them, they're latticing them, so they're distorting them and stuff, and they're just using the same part repeatedly. And so I'll get and when we're doing the TV shows, what they give us is a full-size render of the ship. Okay. And so we get renders of all the angles and some 3/4 and things like that, so we can see everything. We build from those, but I'm like, I'm not going to build that same piece, 14 different scales, a left and a right. I'll build something, I'll make something close. And so what we do is we get the renders, we do that because they've done the digital model. We build the physical model. They get through a process where they scan the physical model, and then they sort of bridge the gap so that they both resemble each other. So
cool.
Yeah. I love to hear people being that organized. I love organization.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure they hate it on the other end when they get the physical model scan. They're like, oh crap. You know, here's all this random stuff they didn't have. So, you know, yeah, it's.
Let's talk about your early days at ILM. You started in 1988 on Ghostbusters 2 and Back to the Future 2.
Yeah,
those are some pretty big films to start off with. How did you get your foot in the door at ILM? Because we know your letters didn't work.
Yeah, the letters didn't work. I knew a guy that I went to high school with named Tony Hudson, and Tony and I shot some Super 8 stop motion stuff back in North Carolina right after Empire came out, and it was pretty neat. We did some pretty interesting stuff for having no money and not knowing what we were doing. But Tony actually got a job in the Creature Shop. Oh. And he called me up. That was in '86. He called me up. Said, "Guess where I'm working? I'm working in the Creature Shop." So I came out and I spent 5 weeks living on his couch. He graciously let me stay there, and I was going to work with him every day. So we're going to the Creature Shop, and that was during the time of Star Trek IV, and Inner Space was just starting to ramp up.
Wow.
Howard the Duck had just finished, and they'd just come back. They'd just done a music video for MTV, so they had just come back. But Star Trek IV was the big project, and they had the whales.
Oh my God.
We went to San Mateo, and there was a hotel called the Dunphy that was down. Well, we stayed at the Dunphy. That doesn't relate to the story, actually. But there was a high school nearby that had I think it was like a 17-foot pool. And it had a downstairs room with a window so you could look into the pool. And so went there, and I think there were 6 whales. And went there and spent 3 days there. And that was really fascinating because the whales were about 4 feet long, and they were fully animatronic, free swimming, radio control whales. And so you had 2 operators down in that room, and you had Don Dow was down there, and there was where the video was that was tied to the camera. Pete Romano was the cameraman, and Randy Johnson was one of the assistants. There was Randy and one other guy that were in scuba gear, and their job was to go out and get the whales and put them in their start position, and then they'd go, and Pete would do the shot, and then repeat the process. The whales could swim back faster than those guys could go get them. And the whales, they looked real. It was really interesting because once you got them in there and they're swimming, you lose sight of the fact these are they're robots. They're not real, but they look real. And they used a material. It was made by a company called Smooth On, and there were 3 different layers of the material, and it's a urethane elastomer, so it's like a silicone rubber almost, but it's a cheaper version of it. And they put a plasticizing agent in the outer layer, 120% of what this plasticizing agent was, and it made it so flexible that when the tail bent, you didn't get wrinkles in the skin, in the surface.
Oh.
Yeah, and if you look at Jaws 3, there's a scene where the shark's got its head stuck in the acrylic tube trying to eat people, the tail sticking out, and the tail is latex and foam with these big, horrible wrinkles. It looks just terrible. That's exactly what you don't want. But the way these whales were built, they looked absolutely real. And they had this huge servo in them that controlled the tail that came out of a missile.
Oh my
I
gosh.
can't remember the particular. Yeah, it had this big servo in it, really powerful. And then it also there was a little cluster of barnacles at the chin, and that was an intake. And there was a piece of Tygon tubing that went out at the center of the flukes in the back, and it was actually an impeller. They could suck water into it. It's like a little jet propulsion. So they could use it to propel the whale as well. And then the whole whale, behind that intake at the chin, there are these ribs on the bottom of the whale. It actually opened like a Ziploc, and you could peel the skin back, and there was the internal part of it. And the whales, they would run for about 20 minutes before something would go wrong.
Wow.
So, and you get
That's
another
a pretty
pair
long
ready.
time.
It was, and they were really something. And it was funny because what we were doing, we're sticking pocket change in the skin to weight them, to make them neutrally buoyant. So everybody's taking their change out and putting them in there and, putting it into the skin and trying to make sure it's neutrally buoyant. But that was my first exposure to seeing something being shot like that. It was amazing. Walt Conti had designed the whales, and Walt had a company, I can't remember the name of it, but he did Anaconda, and he did the Free Willy movies where they're doing those full-size animatronic killer whales.
Yeah.
And last thing I heard that Walt was doing, he'd been working with Jim Cameron. Walt was making these landers when Cameron did his dive to the bottom of the Marianas Trench.
Oh.
Walt made these landers. They were dropping preliminary to study the areas where Cameron was going to go. So, and I'm sure Walt's probably been working on the Avatar films. I just don't know. I don't know exactly what he's up to, but Walt, genius.
Wow.
That wraps up episode 469 of
Skywalking Through Neverland.
We want to thank John Goodson and Spencer Jowitz. And thank you to all of you Skywalkers who listen every week and tune in. And also, please subscribe to our YouTube channel because we have things we want to share.
Every Monday at 6 p.m. Pacific time, we share the things we've done that week.
Mm-hmm.
And last week, we talked about Inside Out 2.
Yeah.
Had a great discussion.
That's right.
About the film and leading up to the film, Inside Out 2, and how much money it's made. Oh, thank goodness. Thank goodness.
Yeah, Pixar is back. And yeah, we also invite you Skywalkers to come on and share something you've done or something you've just added to your collection. You can also just chat here in the Sky Chat as well if you don't want to come on screen and be live with us. So yeah, we love that. We love the interaction.
Now, are you interested in our books today in Star Wars history, parts 1 and 2? Well, you can get them many places. And if you go to our website or our Facebook group and page, we have calendars there where you can come see us and pick up your copy.
That's right.
Or just go to skywalkingthrough-neverland.com/books to get your copies of Today in Star Wars History.
And I'm sorry, that's skywalkingthrough-neverland.com/book.
Book. Did I say books?
You did.
Strike that. It's book. Singular.
Strike that, reverse it.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Willie.
All right, would you like to support Skywalking Through Neverland? You can support us through the Skywalking Force, which is our Patreon. And as a Patreon, you have access to bonus content in the form of our Zoom discussions on the past Disney Plus shows. Also, on every YouTube video we put out, we have you in our credits because you are very, very important. And that bonus content begins at only $5 a month. So you can head to skywalkingforce.com, have a look at the options. And thank you so much to those of you who are already part of the Skywalking Force.
Woohoo! Raise the roof to you. Now, we want to thank our sponsor once again, Small World Vacations, for their support. Thinking of a trip to a Disney park or a Disney cruise? When aren't we thinking about a trip to a Disney park or a Disney cruise? Well, you can fill out a Get a Quote form at smallworldvacations.com today. Their vacation planning service is free of charge, so check it out and tell them Skywalking Through Neverland sent you. So we are part of the Skywalking Network,
Skynet.
where you can find other great shows like Talking Apes,
The Max Effects Podcast.
The Neverland Clubhouse,
Totally Tell Me Everything.
Star Warsologies,
And the YouTube shows Collectopolis and
Today in Star Wars History.
You can also find us on social media. Most places we are at Skywalking Pod. Also on TikTok, we've been posting more videos there. We've been posting little segments of our full episodes. Yeah, which is great. Also, you can find us on Facebook or YouTube. Simply search Skywalking Through Neverland. And you can email us, share@skywalkingthroughneverland.com.
Yeah, more and more people have been emailing us, so thank you.
Yeah.
Now, don't forget to stick around for bloopers and other fun bits that didn't make it into the show. And
Always remember.
never to blow up the Razor Crest.
And Neverland on Alderaan.
Hey, Skywalkers. So, do you notice something different?
Yeah.
We had given you more than no notice today. We gave you
Woohoo!
about 15 minutes notice.
Clappy clap time.
Okay, that's all I wanted to hear. I need direction.
That's right. Hey, do we have to change for next week's recording?
Shh. Those are behind the scenes.
Oh, that's behind
secrets.
the scenes. Oh, don't tell
Yeah, we're
anyone.
gonna record the next episode in about 20 minutes.
Okay, shh, don't tell anyone. All right. Oh yeah, oh there.
Yeah.
There's his signature.
If you
Cool.
showed this to anyone and said, okay, whose signature is that? That could be anybody.
Yeah.
Kind of writes like me. Hey, look at those names to the left. They are part of the Skywalking Force, our Patreon.
Become a producer yourself and check out all the Disney Plus themed bonus content available depending on the level you subscribe.
Become a member of the elite Skywalking Force at skywalkingforce.com.